Cowboys Nation, the offseason just got real, and we need to talk about three names that could change Dallas's entire roster outlook heading into training camp. Free agency isn't over yet, and while most teams are quiet right now, the Cowboys still have some serious gaps to fill. Make sure you smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications because we're bringing you daily Cowboys updates, breaking news, and the insider analysis you won't find anywhere else. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next for America's team. So here's the situation. Minicamp just wrapped up, and while everyone's been focused on the big names and the drama surrounding contract negotiations, there's been some serious discussion behind the scenes about potential free agent additions that could still happen before training camp kicks off. And listen, I know what you're thinking. It's June. Free agency happened months ago. Why are we still talking about this? Well, because championship teams are built in moments like these. The smart organizations, the ones that actually compete for Super Bowls, they're always looking for upgrades, always searching for that extra edge that puts them over the top. And right now, there are still some legitimate NFL caliber players sitting out there on the market waiting for the right opportunity. Now, before we dive into these three intriguing names, we need to address the elephant in the room, the one player everyone keeps bringing up, even though it seems like the Cowboys have moved on. I'm talking about Jadeveon Clowney. Look, I get it. I completely understand why fans keep circling back to this conversation. From a pure talent standpoint, Clowney showed everyone last season that he still got it. Yeah, it took him a few weeks to shake off the rust and get back into legitimate football shape, but once he got rolling, especially down the stretch, he was arguably the best pass rusher on this entire roster, and that's not a slight against Micah Parsons, who plays a different role, but specifically as an edge rusher, getting after the quarterback, Clowney was creating havoc. He was collapsing the pocket, getting pressure, making plays that changed games. Here's the problem, though, and this is why I've been telling you all for weeks now not to get your hopes up. The Cowboys already invested heavily in their defensive line. They've got Micah Parsons, obviously. They brought back DeMarcus Lawrence on a restructured deal. They've got that investment in Sam Williams, who they chose to pay despite some inconsistency. They've got Chauncey Golston, and they signed Marshawn Kneeland in the draft last year. The depth chart is crowded, but here's what really changed everything. When the Cowboys hired their new defensive coordinator and started implementing scheme changes, the public comments from Stephen Jones completely shifted. Earlier in the offseason, he was talking about wanting to bring back multiple free agents, mentioning Clowney by name alongside others. Then suddenly, radio silence. The messaging changed to evaluating the defense and seeing what fits the new system. And reading between the lines, it's pretty clear they've decided Clowney isn't part of that vision, at least not at the price he's probably asking for, until we see something concrete that changes that narrative, something tangible that shows the Cowboys have had a change of heart. I'm just not going to sit here and get everyone excited about a Clowney reunion that probably isn't happening. But let's move on to the names that actually could make sense, the players that might still end up in Dallas before we start playing meaningful football. The first name on this list is one that definitely caught my attention because it addresses a specific role that the Cowboys might actually need filled. We're talking about Austin Ekeler, the veteran running back who spent most of his career tearing up defenses in Los Angeles before bouncing around last season. Now, here's why this could make sense. The Cowboys have their depth at running back with Rico Dowdle. They've got the young guys they want to develop. But Ekeler represents something different. He's a true change of pace back, a third down specialist, a guy who can line up in the slot and create mismatches in the passing game. That's a completely different skill set than what Rico brings, different from the power running style, different from the development guys they're hoping to see progress. And let me give you some context on who Austin Ekeler is and why this conversation is even happening. Go back to 2022, and Ekeler was putting up numbers that had him in the conversation for All-Pro honors. He was dynamic both as a rusher and as a receiver out of the backfield, the kind of player who defensive coordinators had to game plan for specifically. He was catching 70, 80 passes a season, scoring touchdowns in bunches, making plays that kept drives alive. But then the injury bug hit, and it hit hard. Over the past 3 seasons, Ekeler has missed significant time. The availability has been a major concern, and when he has been on the field, the production has steadily declined. This past season was particularly rough. His numbers as a pass catcher dropped off considerably. His efficiency as a runner wasn't anywhere near what it used to be. And then came the big one, the Achilles tear. That's the injury that ends careers, especially for running backs who rely on explosion and cutting ability. So now Ekeler is sitting out there as a free agent, and you have to ask yourself, what version of this player are you actually getting? He's 31 years old, which in running back years is ancient. He's coming off a devastating injury that even young players struggle to fully recover from. And even before the Achilles tear, he was showing signs that his best football was behind him. We're talking about a guy who was averaging under 4 yards per carry the last few seasons, closer to 3.8, which is frankly not good enough for an NFL running back, regardless of your role. The explosion wasn't there. The elusiveness that made him special seemed to be fading. And now you're asking him to come back from an injury that most players never truly recover from. Here's my take on the Ekeler situation, and I want you to let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. When you look at the Cowboys running back room right now, where exactly does Ekeler fit? He doesn't bring special teams value, so that's not a factor. He's obviously not better than your top guys. And then you've got young developmental players who the Cowboys need to see on the field, guys who need reps to figure out if they can contribute to this team long term. Is the current version of Austin Ekeler, 31 years old, coming off an Achilles tear with 3 straight years of declining production, is that guy really better than giving those reps to someone with upside? I don't think so. And here's my biggest concern beyond all the football reasons. You don't want to bring in a veteran at that position who ends up being a progress stopper, someone who takes snaps away from younger players who might actually be part of your future, only to give you mediocre production that doesn't move the needle anyway. The risk versus reward here just doesn't add up for me. If Ekeler was healthy and this was 2 or 3 years ago, absolutely sign me up. But right now, in June of 2025, with all the red flags surrounding his health and his recent performance, I'm passing on this one. Now let's talk offensive line, because the next 2 names both address the trenches, and you know how important that is for any team with Super Bowl aspirations. The second target on this list is Joe Noteboom, and this one's interesting because he brings something the Cowboys always value: versatility. Noteboom played college ball at TCU, so there's the local connection, and throughout his NFL career, he's bounced around between left tackle, left guard, and right guard. That kind of positional flexibility is legitimately valuable in today's NFL, where injuries happen and you need guys who can plug in at multiple spots without the entire offensive line falling apart. But here's where the concerns start to pile up. Noteboom hasn't been a consistent starter in years. He's bounced from the Rams to the Ravens, and while he's gotten snaps at multiple positions, he hasn't actually played well enough to lock down any of those starting jobs. When was the last time Joe Noteboom played at a level where you felt confident with him as a starter? Probably 2 or 3 years ago at this point. And when you look at where he'd fit on the Cowboys depth chart, it gets even murkier. If the pitch is that he's tackle depth who won't cut into the development of younger guys, then you're essentially talking about the 5th or 6th tackle on the roster. And at that point, do you really need that? The Cowboys already have youth at the tackle position that they're trying to develop. Adding a veteran who hasn't played well recently, who would likely just sit on the bench unless multiple injuries hit, that feels more like roster clutter than an actual upgrade. Where Noteboom might make more sense is on the interior, using that guard experience to provide depth at a position where the Cowboys are thinner. But even then, you have to ask if he's actually good enough to make a difference. The tape from recent seasons shows a player who's lost a step, who struggles in pass protection, who gets beat more often than you'd like to see. And for a team that's trying to build a championship caliber offensive line, is that really the guy you want to bring in? I'm skeptical. The positional flexibility sounds great in theory, but if the player himself isn't performing at a high enough level, that versatility doesn't actually matter. Now, here's where things get interesting, because the third name on this list is the one that actually has me intrigued, the one where I could genuinely see the Cowboys making a move. We're talking about Ethan Pocic, and before you skip ahead, hear me out on why this makes way more sense than the other 2 options. Pocic has spent most of his career as a center, with some experience at guard as well. He's not a superstar. He's not going to make the Pro Bowl, but here's what he is. He's a solid, dependable veteran who can give you quality snaps when called upon, and that's exactly what the Cowboys need right now as a backup center. Let me explain the situation. The Cowboys are planning to have their young interior linemen compete for backup roles, with the expectation that if there's an injury at guard or center, they can plug someone in without the offense completely falling apart. But here's the risk. What if that young player isn't ready? What if an injury happens and suddenly you're asking someone with limited experience to anchor the offensive line from the center position, making all the calls, handling all the protections, snapping the ball to your franchise quarterback? That's a lot of pressure, and if it goes wrong, it could derail your entire season. This is where Pocic makes sense. He's logged serious snaps in this league, over 800 snaps in recent seasons, playing primarily at center. He's not going to wow you with elite athleticism. And yeah, there's been some decline from his best years back in 2022 when he was with the Browns, but he's still a playable NFL center who understands protections, who can handle the mental side of the position, who brings veteran leadership to the offensive line room. And here's the key detail that everyone's missing. There aren't many quality free agent centers available right now. The position is hard to fill, and guys who can actually do the job competently are in demand. Posich is sitting out there, probably not commanding a huge contract, likely looking for an opportunity to contribute with a competitive team. Think about what the Cowboys need. They need someone who can be the backup center, who hopefully never has to play a single meaningful snap, but if called upon, won't completely sink the offense. That's Ethan Posich's profile exactly. He's not going to cost much more than the veteran minimum, probably in that same price range as what they would have paid their previous backup. And he brings way more experience and reliability than asking a young developmental player to handle that responsibility. This is the kind of low risk, high reward signing that smart teams make in June and July. It's not flashy, it won't make headlines, but come week 8 when there's an injury and suddenly you need a center to step in against a tough defensive front, you'll be really glad you've got a veteran with over 1,000 career snaps who knows what he's doing. Now, obviously, the scheme fit matters. The Cowboys need to make sure Posich can handle what they're asking him to do in their offensive system, but that's what these late June and early July signings are all about. You bring guys in for a workout, you evaluate if they fit, and if it makes sense, you make the move. Of the 3 names we've discussed today, Posich is the one I'd actually be excited about. It addresses a legitimate need. It doesn't break the bank financially. It doesn't block any young players from developing, and it gives you insurance at one of the most important positions on the entire offense. If the Cowboys announce in late July or early August that they've signed Ethan Posich, I'll be telling you that's a smart, under-the-radar move that could end up being really important if things go sideways with injuries during the season. So, Cowboys Nation, that's the breakdown. 3 potential free agent targets, 3 very different situations, but all addressing areas where Dallas could still use some help. Let me know in the comments which of these moves you'd like to see happen. Are you Team Ekeler, thinking the upside is worth the risk? Are you on board with Noteboom's versatility? Or are you with me on Posich being the smart play? And don't forget, hit that subscribe button because we're tracking every single Cowboys move this offseason. And when news breaks, you'll hear it here first. This is the content you need to stay ahead of the game to know what's really happening with America's team. We'll see you in the next one.